This week in IT SPARC Cast, Unifi redeems itself with 10 gig access points. VMware says, don't call it a comeback. We've been here for years. And Bleepy Computer says, hello, my name is Magil Tarasco Acuna. You pwned my Bluetooth. Prepare to die.
You nailed it.
Greetings and welcome to IT SPARC Cast. I'm your host, John Barker.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt. Let's go see what's going on out there.
It's Friday, March 14th. IT SPARC Cast is a digest of the IT news over the last week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years of experience working in IT or for IT vendors. And now, the news bites.
Well, beware the Ides of March, but beware the Ides of security on your kids as well. We're at that time of year, so why not? So let's talk about a security breach that happened in January. And in January, what happened is PowerSchool, which provides, and any parent who's watching this knows what PowerSchool is. Heck, even I know, and my kid's 28, right? PowerSchool, which provides K-12 software to more than 18,000 schools, to support some 60 million students across North America, first disclosed a data breach in early January of this year. So, 2025. California-based company, which Bain Capital acquired for $5.6 billion. Sorry, this came to us via TechCrunch. They've always got to throw in the M&A piece. I don't know that has any bearing on this. Said an unknown hacker used a single compromised credential to breach its customer support portal 2024 of December, and allowing further access to the company's school info system, PowerSchool SIS, schools use to manage student records, grades, attendance, and enrollment. So, nothing important there, right? I'm sure it's not linked to any other critical information. Well, okay, let's talk about that a bit. PowerSchool's been open about some aspects of the breach. For example, PowerSchool told TechCrunch breached PowerSchool source portal did not support multi-factor authentication at the time of the incident. So they probably fixed that. But several important questions remain unanswered months on. So what PowerSchool hasn't said about this breach is how many students and staff were affected, how much data was gotten, what type of data was stolen, how much we paid to the hacker responsible for the breach. So that personally right there is a really interesting one. That means they paid off the hacker. So not only were they breached and they lost the information, apparently the data was stolen and they threatened to release it. But we don't know what evidence that PowerSchool received that the stolen data has been deleted. If you pay a criminal to not talk about your stuff, do you have any evidence that they're not going to talk about your stuff? And the hacker behind the data breach is not yet known. Why do we bring this one up? John, are you a parent?
I am. Twice.
You might want to go beat on your local school district about this.
Yeah, I'll have to go look. I'm not sure our school system uses PowerSchool or not. I can look into that. But this is nasty stuff. Anytime you deal with this kind of hacking or ransomware kind of stuff, it's really scary. I have a buddy that used to work for a publishing company, and they got hit by really nasty ransomware, and they ended up paying it because it was faster and at the end of the day cheaper for them to pay it than to move on. Which is why ransomware keeps happening, is that when they find that threshold that they can charge X amount and sometimes millions of dollars, but it's cheaper to pay it than to remediate it. But like you said, how do you know when you're dealing with obviously a criminal or a criminal organization that they're not going to come back and ask for more later or,
criminal organizations are notable for keeping their word, aren't they?
Exactly. So
they won't do anything else. They're people of honor.
That's scary stuff. It's scary stuff. Then you're dealing with your kids and other information about your kids, and who knows what kind of information that might be. It could be addresses and bus routes, and who knows what might be in there. I mean, probably not bus routes in PowerSchool, but who knows what information they might have gotten.
And you might be asking to yourself, in your best Antigua Montoya voice, why are they not doing this as a CVE? And then you might think, oh no, they have something worse. But how about we do something nice before we do that? Right?
We will. So Unifi, and if you remember last week, I beat up pretty heavily on Unifi for their U7 Lite access point. And as if to say mea culpa and to make up for it, this week Ubiquiti announced new access points. These are the U7 Pro XG and the U7 Pro XGS. And this XG, these are their 10 gig Ethernet port connected access points. These are their Wi-Fi 7. So, and at the end of this episode, we're going to actually read some feedback because whenever we do an episode where we talk about Unifi, we get a lot of feedback from you, our listeners, and we're going to talk about that feedback because we got some great feedback. But let's talk about this. So these new access points are very similar to their existing U7 Pro, but they have 10 gig connectivity. So both access points obviously feature Wi-Fi 7 capabilities. They have high data rates. They achieve 5.8 gigabits per second on the 6 gigahertz channel and 688 megabits on the 2.4 channels. They have 10 gigabit uplinks, and they have advanced features including wireless meshing, band steering, and fast roaming. So this is pretty much in line with their existing U7 Pro. The U7 Pro XG, which sells for $200, just $10 more than their current price for the U7 Pro, has 6 spatial streams, again, very similar to the U7 Pro, and it supports 4.3 gigabits per second on the 5 gigahertz channel. It's got coverage up to 140 square meters. It has a high capacity of up to 300 concurrent clients, and it's powered by PoE Plus. So just standard PoE Plus that you would find on most Ethernet switches. Now, the U7 Pro XGS retails for about $300. It has 8 spatial streams, so it's got one more radio there, and it provides up to 8.6 gigabits per second on the 5 gigahertz channel. Now, whether you can actually achieve that in real world is questionable, but it shows why they're starting to look at that 10 gigabit Ethernet connectivity. It does support up to 160 square meter coverage. It says it'll support up to 500 concurrent clients. It also has that 10 gigabit uplink. It does require PoE++, so it's one more level up. But to say, really going up a whole level up here, and this is where they start adding in the PoE++, and nothing below this requires it, that's pretty good, delineation there. So below this, you don't need the PoE++, and above it, you do. That's pretty good. It also has some additional advanced featuring, including support for zero weight DFS. And what that is dynamic frequency selection.
Now,
so
I'm
really excited about this. Yeah.
I have a question. First of all, are you ever going to see this level of throughput in the real world?
No.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that from my own personal experience, I still have my U7 Pros in the box ready to deploy. They are about to get returned to Ubiquiti, and I'm about to get some XGSs delivered instead. So they're only $10 more. I'm sure I'll get either a restocking fee, and I'm sure I'll have to pay for shipping back. But for the difference of being able to support 10 gig Ethernet and see some additional level of performance, I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I don't know. So people will come back and no doubt comment that this isn't, the type of enterprise. This is obviously pointed at an SMB market, right?
Right.
Just why we like to talk about this stuff. But, you have to say, well, what if, I'm going to get higher data rates in the home. And my answer to that is maybe not.
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do an audible. And instead of reading the feedback that we got, because it was all Unifi based feedback that we got.
So we should talk about it now.
Let's just talk about it now, because some people may jump off the stream and may not listen to it. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this in there now. And I want to encourage all of you to send us email feedback at itsparkcast.com, or if you're on YouTube, comment below. However you want to reach out to us on X at IT SPARC Cast. Let us know what you feel about this. So first of all, Ben, who's a longtime friend of ours, reached out. He said how much he liked the episode. Old Man Dom 42 on YouTube said that he was reading that the Ubiquiti Wi-Fi 7 access points were having trouble dropping IoT devices. Now, I've been running a few Wi-Fi 7, the U7 Pros for a while. I haven't had this problem. I've got a truckload of IoT devices. Now, it may be that it has to do with whatever chipset those IoT devices are running, but who knows? I actually responded and asked him for like more details. Could he point me to some articles but I haven't heard back from him yet.
So which firmware would be the next question? Because we've had a couple of firmware pushes. I saw originally John and I did discuss this originally because I am also running the U7 Pros in my setup. I have one wall mount that I haven't deployed yet, and but I've got two access points, and I haven't suffered it. But my IoT points aren't moving.
Right,
they're not roaming. Right, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
What other feedback did we get?
SKO Farrell on YouTube said that corporate customers don't care about 6 gigahertz. And I would say that in a lot of cases that's true. But at the last corporate office that I worked at, there were 50 visible SSIDs. And both the 2.4, especially the 2.4, but also the 5 gigahertz spectrum was really crowded, and we would get drops on occasion. Now, luckily, the company I worked for was a networking company, and they were really good about managing the Wi-Fi, so it was generally pretty good. But we did still even have problems there because all the other companies around us, they weren't always as good about it. We would find a lot of bleed over and interference there. But with 6 gigahertz, you would find a lot more open spectrum. Now, that being said, not a lot of clients support the 6 gigahertz yet.
And that is the reason. That is the reason. So there's two reasons, in my opinion. One is 6 gig clients are only starting to permeate now. But the secondary thing is the propagation characteristics of getting a good tight connection with 6 gig requires nearly line of sight to the access point. And that means you're not getting a huge amount of cross bleed between the networks, but it also means that you've got to pay much greater attention to your AP placement to get the data rates that they're talking about. So, 6 gig is one of those things where if your corporation probably doesn't, it's not on the top of their list right now, but if they're going to upgrade their APs, they're going to get it.
Yeah.
Guarantee you that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you might as well. If you're upgrading right now, you definitely want to go for either 6E or 7.
And we saw this when we were selling this stuff on an enterprise level.
100%.
What other feedback did we get?
So Darren 6028 mentioned that he was seeing really great throughput on U7 Lite. I asked him a little bit for more detail. He was only running a single U7 Lite. And in that case, you're not going to run into any roaming issues if you are running 6 gigahertz clients like I was, and granted, my mistake by mixing 6 gigahertz APs and non-6 gigahertz APs, and that was my mistake. I admitted that. That's why I turned off the 6 gigahertz access points, or turned off the radios on those 6 gigahertz access points. And that's why I've now bought all 6 gigahertz access points and mixed and match. I'm just saying that it was a mistake for Unifi to release Wi-Fi 7 access points without 6 gigahertz, or at least the ability to have software-defined radios so that they could have that. Now, I'm glad that Darren is seeing that. He actually said that his U7 Lite was seeing much better performance than his U6 Lite. I think that's great for him, and I'm really happy for him there.
Now, we noticed one thing, though.
What's that?
When we went in. So John and I go onto the store to look at this stuff a lot. Kudos to Ubiquiti, because they put a specific icon on the cards for all of their APs. There is now an icon that specifies it as a 6 gig radio. So I don't know if you heard this from us. I don't know who you heard this from, but you answered and we see it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's really what actually notified for me, because what I said last week was I actually put the U7 Lite and 2 U7 Lights and 2 U7 walls in my cart. And then I noticed that the wall had this 6 gigahertz icon on it. And so I went and looked at the light and saw that it didn't. That's what actually notified me. And then I went and did a little more research. I actually should have done the research quicker, but I was in a hurry when I saw the U7 Lite being released. That actually was great. And I agree with you. It was good that they did that. It really did help highlight that. Now, I had a big back and forth last night and today, with a gentleman who goes by Apex Nick on YouTube. And he really came at us a little hard at first and said that to so-called experts, he said that most lower end access points do not have 6 gigahertz radios. And I kind of said, look, I'm familiar with the Aruba Instant On and the extreme dual radios and other dual radio systems, and they all have software defined radios where you can choose, is this a 2.4 gigahertz radio or is it a 6 gigahertz radio, and so forth. After going back and forth several times with him, he came back and said, well, the Asus low end systems all have 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. And that's when I realized he was talking about home router systems. And I kind of qualified, look, we're generally talking about business systems, not always enterprise based, but we're talking about business systems. Could be Soho, it could be small business, or up to full size enterprise. But we're always talking about business solutions. And I feel that Unifi, even if it's for a small business, is still a business solution. You're not finding your average home user installing Unifi at home. Lou and I are not average home users. You guys are not average home users.
This is my Asus previous Wi-Fi 7, and yes, it has 6 gigahertz.
Right.
But it's not the low end. So the thing is that just for the edification of folks, we worked extremely closely with our engineering folks, the last company we worked for. So we have actually seen how this stuff tends to roll out. And it rolls out when a new chip is developed. So the new chips go out. Broadcom comes out with its latest batch of chips, and they tell everybody out there, Asus and Ubiquiti and Cisco and Extreme, whoever, HP Aruba, all this good Mist, all this good stuff. Here's this new thing we have. And what you start to see, and from when that chip rolls out, it's usually a minimum of 12 months for them to. So this chip probably rolled out 12 months ago. And then they have to go through the certification. They've got to go and get it, homologated into different countries. It's a big process, but it's almost always driven by the fact, hey, somebody's making this cheaper chip now. And then you start to see a whole pile of these things show up. So, it's pretty normal. It's pretty normal.
So before we roll on to the next story, I just want to say that both Lou and I are big fans of Unifi, but because of that, we are going to call them out when we feel that they make a mistake, because we do rely on them for our own use, and we do recommend them to many of our friends and colleagues that are running, especially their small businesses and even some smaller enterprises. So when we do recommend them and then we feel that they failed us in some way or another, or have failed their customers, we're going to call them out, but we do still recommend them. So with that, Lou, what's the next story?
Well, this is cool because this ties into a lot of stuff that we've been talking about with remote work. So I got this article out of Wall Street Journal of all places. Yes, I do pay attention to the business weenies. I do have a subscription to Wall Street Journal. It's always interesting to see how folks are spending their money. That's the place where you go if you want to sell networks, right? So Google has a new technology that gives you a telepresence with pseudo 3 dimensions is really the leading thing here, right? And they partnered with Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Is it HPE or HPQ? Did we find that out?
Yeah, it's HPQ. It's the printer company.
It's the printer company. It's not, although I wouldn't be shocked if there's going to be a software crossover here at some point too. We had a big discussion about this, and I'm like, my brain. So what's cool is it's a pseudo 3-dimensional thing that works using something called a light field display. So what a light field display is, a 2D display panel coupled with a light modulation device, so it can shift the pixels, and you can get sort of like 3D in a box effect out of it. Now, one of the things, if you've ever looked at our remote office pitch, is that for truly in-office experience, you have to make the screen go away. You have to break the illusion that you're on the end of a link. Now, I've seen this done with a 3-screen telepresence that Cisco deployed many, many years ago, the CT3000, but it was really, really expensive. It was $300,000 for a node. And that was kind of what put a damper on that. So the folks from Wall Street Journal, they were saying that I knew the person was on the screen in front of me, wasn't sitting in the room with me. But when he reached toward me with an apple, I felt as if his hand had crossed into my space. Seemed for a moment like the apple could drop into my lap. So I have a personal experience with this. The first time that we ever deployed a telepresence to an audience was Telecom Asia. It was in 2005. We were in Hong Kong. And instead of having, when we set up the rooms, instead of having the screens face each other in the room, we set them up so that the screens were on up other walls. So everybody was facing the same direction and they were looking at each other when they walked in. When the call came up, everything changed. And it was such a big deal that we almost had a riot. They had to post additional security. It was ridiculous. The thing is, if somebody breaks, if you can break that illusion of being on a call, that's a big deal. And that's exactly what the Wall Street Journal, a business writer, is saying that this thing does. It's called Starline. Google came up with it. It uses the light field panels, and it was born out of Google Labs. It works with Google Meet as well as Zoom. They're partnering with HP to bring it to market. We don't know what it's going to cost yet, but this one looks really promising. So I would say keep an eye on this one.
It sounds pretty exciting. It just taking your Zoom to the next level sounds real exciting.
Yeah, well, the ability to like put one, if they can get the price low enough on the displays, imagine having a dedicated screen in your office just for that. And we've all, John and I go back and forth. We like go to Costco or we go to Wally World or whatever, and we look at the price of the 65-inch really nice LCDs and go, holy crap, you can get these for $300. So if they can get the cost of that audio light modulation down to a really nice price, we could be looking at something very, very compelling. Absolutely. Now, I think what we ought to do is update you on something we've been keeping an eye on for a while because we promised we would.
Yeah, so we've been talking about VMware and their price increases for a while. And one of the theories that we've been talking about was that what Broadcom really wants to do is to kind of cut out their low tier customers and really focus on the customers that are willing to pay and are almost either stuck or just really in love with the VMware product line. And according to the register, that seems to be the case. So what they're saying is that 70% of the large VMware customers are buying into the biggest bundles. And so what's happened is that according to their first quarter 2025 fiscal results, they recorded a $14.92 billion earnings in one quarter, which represents a 25% increase compared to the same period last year. And net income soared to $5.5 billion, which is a substantial rise from the previous year's figures. What does that mean? It's working. They're increasing their prices. They're dropping their low-tier customers, and their higher-tier customers are paying the new Broadcom tax, and they're sticking around, and Broadcom is raking in the cash. What's happened here is VMware has been responsible for approximately 70% of Broadcom's top 10,000 customers who have all adopted VMware's Cloud Foundation stack. So seems like what's going on at Broadcom is working. And what we have said is this is what Broadcom does. Broadcom is a machine that grows through inorganic growth. And I had a conversation a few years ago with a CEO who was really tight with both the chief revenue officer and the CEO at Broadcom. And he was basically learning effectively their virtual classroom, if you will, of how to grow through inorganic growth, which means through acquisition. And Broadcom is the master at this. They do this better than almost anybody else, is that they don't necessarily grow through organic growth. They don't keep increasing the value of what they have. If you look at their portfolio of the Symantec product lines and the Computer Associate product lines and all the other product lines, those are not growth areas for them. They cut them down and they make them super efficient, and then they just crank the engine and let them just keep driving revenue through customers that are just not going to ever move. And maybe they crank up the prices to a point where they know exactly where they can get them to. And that's what they do. And that seems to be what they're doing with VMware. Now, how long will that work? to be seen, but I'm going to guess that they're going to more than make up what they've paid for VMware, and they're going to be very happy for quite a while.
So this is a question. I would have to say that this is similar to Cisco's business model, except the difference that I'm seeing between Broadcom and Cisco is Cisco will run a business for about 2 years, and if it really doesn't catch on by itself, it goes away, right?
Yeah.
They don't do a huge amount of integration. Now, from what I'm seeing, they're trying to change that, but that is sort of the classic Cisco approach. What Broadcom is doing, though, if you look at their chips, for example, like the Stratacom, the Strata OS, and the XGS and Jericho chips, is that they continue to add to that. They continue to add to the portfolio. So the question that I would have for folks out there, is anybody on here who just renewed your VMware or deep into this, do you have any insight? Can you tell us what VMware is doing to add to the value? They asked for a lot more money for this new thing. This new package is pretty big. What have they done to make it worth your time? We'd be really interested to know.
And I'll just qualify what I said before. So Broadcom's really two different businesses, right? There's a chipset business, and then there's this whole other side where they're making acquisitions mostly of software companies that they then just kind of crank along there. So almost really two different companies under one umbrella. So I would qualify. I think that the Broadcom chip manufacturing, they do some innovation there. So I don't want to diminish that too much. But on the other side of the business, I don't see a lot of innovation coming out of their Symantec business or their Computer Associates business. It'll be interesting to see if there's any innovation come out of the VMware side of that.
Yeah, I'd be very curious. I still think we're going to see some interesting moves towards open source. To that manner, the OpenStack just moved under the Linux Foundation, so we'll see if that kicks up any of the synergies between the other projects in there, because that's where Kubernetes and Docker and all that stuff sit. But all of the fun stuff. But realistically speaking, it seems like it's a more competitive marketplace now, which is good news.
Yep,
which is really good news.
But on a bad news side, it is now time for the CVE of the week.
Well, hey, I always like to pick the offbeat ones, because if you're tracking your software deployments, your hardware deployments, usually you have warnings turned on for vulnerabilities coming either from the vendor or you have a source. If you don't, you need to get that. But what I'm really looking for is the sneaky ones, and this one is really sneaky. So this one comes to us via Bleeping Computer, and what happened is they found undocumented commands in Bluetooth chip used by billions of devices. So let me break this down for you. A Spanish researcher, Miguel Tarasco Acuña and Antonio Vasquez Blanco. I can't not say it that way after watching Princess Bride. Besides, it sounds awesome. These guys probably run around with swords. TarLogic Security in Spain presented their findings at RootedCon in Madrid. And this was like this last week. So they detected a backdoor in something called ESP32. Now, folks, if you're at all in the hacker community or the do-it-yourself, you know what the ESP32 is. So what's interesting to me is I happen to have an ESP32 right here. And I have this right here because if you bought one of those mini splits and you want to control it on your Wi-Fi, like through Home Assistant, which I use, these are 12 bucks. They're really inexpensive. This particular one was made in Ukraine, which I think is a nice way to support them. And it supports Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on its chip. So they are everywhere. I know I have at least 3 of these things on my network. The challenge is they found 29 undocumented commands characterized as a backdoor that could be used for memory manipulation. So read-write of the RAM and the flash, which means you could put a whole new program into these things, MAC address spoofing, and LMP LLCP packet injection, which means I can use this as a base to hack other things. That's a problem because usually, in this case, this one is on Wi-Fi. You have a trust relationship between this device here and the other devices in your house or your business. These are really common in industrial microcontrollers in your business too. So why is this thing so nasty? Because you don't even know you have them. And they're all over the place. Now, the good news is that Expressive, who makes the chipset for the ESP32 chipset, published a statement Monday of this week, response to their findings, saying the undocumented commands are debug commands used for internal testing. Oops. We'll see, right? Were those left in deliberately or not? I don't know. They quoted to say the functionality found in the debug commands are included for testing purposes. Debug commands are part of Expressive's implementation of the HCI, the host controller interface, protocol used in Bluetooth technology. Protocol is used internally in a product to communicate between the Bluetooth layers. Despite the low risk, vendors stated they will remove the debug commands in a future software update. So this does have an assigned CVE. The CVE is 2025-27840. The reason that I brought this to your attention is you're going to have to do more than ordinary stuff to make sure you patch this. So, I have to go back to the vendor, whoever, this is open source software running on this thing. So I need to monitor that software and make sure that those commands are not present.
So I got to just jump in on this because
yes,
you and I used to sell solutions that would protect a network from IoT devices. And the pitch would be that your HVAC system or the IoT thermometer that you would put into the corporate fish tank or whatever it was were designed by people that were really good at the HVAC, but really didn't know what they were doing when it came to security and IoT. And that's why you had to protect it. In this case, these are the guys that are supposed to be good at the IoT piece, and they're putting debug commands in and leaving them in a production environment. That is inexcusable.
It is a huge problem because the smart people that know HVAC, they put these in there.
Right.
That way you don't have to worry about the stack integration. This thing is basically talking to a UART, talks to a serial port, 9600 baud.
This is one step away from having your username and password being admin and shipping it that way. I mean, it's really one step away from that. I can't believe that somebody would in 2025 is shipping with debug commands available on an open channel. This is just unexcusable. It really is.
Folks, take a look at your network. I noticed, as John and I have said earlier in this cast, we both run Ubiquiti. Ubiquiti has identified more than one MAC address associated with this particular technology in my network. So I'll be watching for firmware updates. Just do us a favor, take a quick look at your workplace or your house. If you see any of these around, make sure you know what version it is. And if it's in a device, that device is going to upgrade its firmware automatically. That's all.
I'm about to go do that as soon as we finish this recording.
So now you know.
So that is going to wrap up this episode. I do want to thank those that we mentioned earlier that sent us feedback. So that's Ben, Old Man Dom, SKO Farrell, Darren, and even Apex Nick. We do want you to challenge us. And if we get something wrong, please let us know. Don't feel like we only want positive feedback. So let us know if you think we got something wrong. Happy to go back and forth with you. If we feel we're right, we're going to tell you we think we're right. But we're happy to learn. We're engineers. We like to learn, and we never will assume that we're always right. But with that, we do want you to send us your thoughts. So send email to feedback@itsparkcast.com. That's feedback at itsparkcast.com, or hit us up on X at IT SPARCcast. You can also, if you're on YouTube, you can leave us a comment down below. As I said, we read every single one. And as the gentleman we mentioned before, we answer almost every single one as fast as we can. Please hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications. That's really going to help us grow. If you feel that you're getting value out of this, if you're enjoying our content, please share our channel with your friends, with your colleagues, so they can get the same content as well. So with that, we'll see you next time with more news and opinions on the world of enterprise IT. Take care.
Thank you so much.